handbag. That's right. Ancient Sumerians were more than familiar with handbags, or perhaps objects that modern people perceive as such.
What if I told you that ancient civilizations from Turkey to Mexico, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all carved the exact same mysterious object into their most sacred temples? An object that looks eerily similar to something you might carry today. This isn't science fiction. This is real archaeology, and it's been hiding in plain sight for over 11,000 years. Today, we're diving into one of archaeology's most puzzling mysteries, the handbags of the gods. Let me take you to southeastern Turkey, to a mountain ridge that's been hiding secrets for longer than recorded history. This is Göbekli Tepe, and when archaeologists first unearthed it, they couldn't believe what they were seeing. Dating back to approximately 11,000 BC, Göbekli Tepe is older than Stonehenge by 6,000 years. It's older than the Egyptian pyramids by 7,000 years. In fact, it's so old that it was built before agriculture, before pottery, before humans had even invented the wheel. These were still hunter-gatherers, living in small groups, supposedly without the organization or technology to build massive stone temples. And yet, here it stands. The temple complex features massive T-shaped limestone pillars, some weighing up to 15 tons, carved with incredible precision and decorated with intricate images of animals, mythical creatures, and geometric symbols. The craftsmanship is breathtaking, especially when you remember these people supposedly had only stone tools. But here's where it gets really interesting. On one particular pillar, known as Pillar 43 or the Vulture Stone, archaeologists found something unexpected. At the top of this pillar, carved with deliberate precision, are three identical shapes. Each one features a rounded, semicircular handle at the top and a rectangular base at the bottom. They look exactly like handbags. Now, you might think this is just a coincidence. Maybe ancient people liked bags. Maybe it's just a random design. But here's the thing that made archaeologists' jaws drop. These exact same symbols have been found carved into temples and monuments on the other side of the world, created by civilizations that supposedly never had any contact with each other. Fast forward several thousand years from Göbekli Tepe, and we arrive in ancient Mesopotamia, the so-called cradle of civilization. Here, between 880 and 859 BC, the Assyrians created massive stone relief carvings to decorate their palaces and temples in cities like Nimrud. These reliefs show winged beings, often identified as the Apkallu, or wise sages sent by the gods. These figures are depicted as powerful, divine entities with wings and sometimes the heads of eagles. And in their hands, they're carrying something very specific: handbag-shaped objects, identical to those carved at Göbekli Tepe thousands of years earlier. The Assyrian carvings are incredibly detailed. You can see the texture of the bags, the way the handles curve, and how the figures hold them with reverence, as if they contain something precious or powerful. Now let's jump across the Atlantic Ocean to ancient Mesoamerica. Between 1200 and 400 BC, the Olmec civilization, one of the earliest in the Americas, created its own stone monuments. One of the most famous is Monument 19 from La Venta in modern-day Mexico. This carving depicts what many researchers believe to be an early representation of the feathered serpent god, known later to the Maya as Kukulkan and to the Aztecs as Quetzalcoatl. And what is this deity holding? You guessed it. The exact same handbag symbol. But it doesn't stop there. Travel to Tula, Mexico, where the massive Atlantean statues stand guard. These colossal figures carved by the Toltec civilization each stand over 15 feet tall. Look closely at their right hands and you'll see they're clutching the same mysterious handbag shape moved to ancient Egypt. And you'll find handbag-like symbols appearing in hieroglyphs, often associated with gods and sacred spaces. Travel to New Zealand, and Maori legends speak of a hero who ascended to the realm of the gods and returned carrying 3 baskets of wisdom, depicted in artwork that bears striking similarities to these ancient handbag symbols. The pattern is undeniable. Cultures separated by thousands of miles, thousands of years, and with no known contact, all carved the same symbol. All treated it as something important enough to place in their most sacred art. All associated it with gods, divine beings, and sacred knowledge. This is the kind of coincidence that keeps archaeologists awake at night. So if these symbols appear everywhere, surely ancient texts must explain what they are, right? Well, yes and no. This is where our investigation gets really interesting. In Mesopotamian culture, these objects were actually identified in their own writings. The Akkadian texts, which include Assyrian and Babylonian records, refer to these objects with specific names: Bondudu, meaning bucket, and Mululu, meaning purifier. That's right. According to the ancient Mesopotamians themselves, these weren't mystical alien devices or magical portals. They were buckets. Ritual buckets, to be specific, are used in purification ceremonies. Archaeological evidence supports this. Researchers have actually found physical examples of such buckets that match the carved depictions almost exactly. These were likely used to hold water or other sacred liquids used in religious rituals, particularly in ceremonies involving sacred trees. In Sumerian texts, there are descriptions of rituals where these buckets were used to water sacred date palm trees. The winged Apkallu figures you see in Assyrian art weren't just carrying random handbags. They were performing sacred agricultural rites, blessing the land and ensuring fertility and abundance. But here's where things get complicated. If we know what the Mesopotamian handbags were, does that explain all the other instances around the world? Remember, we're talking about symbols that appear 11,000 years ago in Turkey, and then reappear in completely different cultures thousands of years later and thousands of miles away. The practical explanation works for Mesopotamia, but it doesn't necessarily explain Göbekli Tepe, where agriculture hadn't even been invented yet. It doesn't fully explain the Olmec or Toltec depictions. And it certainly doesn't explain why cultures with no contact would independently choose to depict the exact same symbolic shape. When mainstream explanations fall short, theories multiply. And the handbag mystery has generated some fascinating ones. Let's explore what researchers and scholars have proposed. One of the most popular scholarly theories is that these handbags represent the cosmos itself. Think about the shape: a semicircular handle on top and a rectangular base below. According to researcher Laird Scranton and others, this design might be deeply symbolic. In many ancient cultures from Africa to India to China, the circle represented spirituality, the heavens, and the non-material world. The square, meanwhile, represented the earth, materiality, and the physical realm. The handbag symbol, combining both shapes, could therefore represent the unification of heaven and earth, the spiritual and the material, the divine and the mortal. This theory suggests that the handbag wasn't depicting an actual physical object at all, but rather a sophisticated symbolic representation of the universe disguised as an everyday item that ancient people could understand. It's like using familiar imagery to explain complex cosmic concepts, similar to how we use computer metaphors to explain how the brain works. At Göbekli Tepe, this theory suggests the three handbags on Pillar 43 might represent different aspects of cosmic order, or the three realms of existence: the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Another compelling theory proposes that these handbags represent containers of sacred wisdom. This interpretation aligns beautifully with the Maori legends of the three baskets of knowledge carried from the realm of the gods to humanity. In this view, the handbags symbolize the transmission of divine knowledge from the gods to humanity. They're not just buckets or baskets, but metaphorical vessels carrying the most precious cargo imaginable: wisdom, understanding, and the secrets of civilization. This theory gains strength when you consider what else appears in these ancient carvings. In many depictions, the figures carrying the handbags are clearly divine or semi-divine beings, teachers or culture heroes who brought knowledge to humanity. The handbags might represent the very essence of what they're bringing: the knowledge of agriculture, astronomy, mathematics, writing, or other civilizational arts. Some researchers propose that the handbag shape represents portable shelters or architectural structures. The curved top could symbolize the domed poles of tents, while the square bottom represents the cloth or animal skins draped across them. This interpretation draws parallels with the Native American teepee, the Central Asian yurt, and other ancient portable dwellings. In ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs, the handbag-like symbols are sometimes interpreted as divine dwellings, the homes of gods and goddesses. This makes the symbol both practical and sacred, representing shelter and divine protection simultaneously. Another angle on this theory connects the handbags to agriculture, particularly sowing seeds. In Mesopotamian seals and Egyptian murals, you can find images of sowars carrying seed bags that look remarkably similar to the mysterious handbag symbols. Some researchers argue that at Göbekli Tepe and elsewhere, these symbols might represent the beginning of agricultural knowledge, the transition from hunting and gathering to farming. One of the more technical theories proposes that the handbags at Göbekli Tepe specifically represent celestial markers related to time and the calendar. This interpretation considers the handbags alongside other symbols on Pillar 43, including animals like vultures and scorpions. In Middle Eastern and Central Asian cultures, both vultures and scorpions were used as calendar markers. Vultures begin their mating displays when the first rains arrive in November, marking the transition from the dry season to the wet season. Scorpions, meanwhile, disappear from the fields and seek shelter when the cold rains come, also in November. According to this theory, the three handbags might represent three key time periods, seasons, or celestial events. Combined with the other symbols on Pillar 43, they could form a sophisticated calendar system or astronomical reference that helped ancient people track time and agricultural cycles. Now we enter more speculative territory. Some alternative researchers, including authors like Graham Hancock, have proposed that the global appearance of the handbag symbol suggests the influence of a lost advanced civilization or an ancient global culture that predates our known history. In his book, Magicians of the Gods, Hancock points out the striking similarities between handbag depictions at Göbekli Tepe in Assyria and Iraq and among the Olmecs of Mesoamerica. He asks whether these containers might be symbols of office for an initiatic brotherhood, far-traveled and deeply ancient, with roots reaching back into the remotest prehistory. This theory is controversial because it challenges conventional archaeological understanding of how ancient cultures developed independently. However, it resonates with many people because it offers an explanation for the undeniable similarities we see across cultures that supposedly never connected. So what do mainstream archaeologists and scientists say about all this? The truth is, they're divided, but most lean toward more conservative explanations while acknowledging the mystery. The majority of academic archaeologists argue that the handbag symbols likely arose independently in different cultures because they represent universal human needs and concepts. Baskets and bags have been fundamental to human life for tens of thousands of years. We needed containers to carry food, seeds, tools, and sacred objects. It makes sense that such containers would appear in religious art. Furthermore, humans across cultures tend to develop similar symbolic languages. The circle and square representing heaven and earth aren't unique to one culture. It's a pattern that emerges independently in many societies. If the handbag symbol is combining these universal shapes, multiple cultures could have arrived at similar designs independently. Archaeologists also point out that not all handbag depictions are identical. While they share a general shape, there are variations in detail, decoration, and context that suggest different meanings in different cultures. The Assyrian ritual buckets were demonstrably real objects with specific religious functions. Applying that same interpretation everywhere might be oversimplifying. That said, even skeptical researchers admit there are genuine mysteries here. Why did the handbag motif appear so early at Göbekli Tepe, long before we thought such symbolic thinking existed? Why do the proportions and basic design remain so consistent across cultures? And why is the symbol almost always associated with divine or sacred contexts rather than everyday use? These questions don't have easy answers, and honest scientists acknowledge that our understanding of prehistoric cultures is still evolving. Every few years, new discoveries push back the dates for when humans developed complex symbolic thinking, sophisticated architecture, or long-distance trade networks. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed diving deep into this archaeological mystery, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more explorations of ancient enigmas that challenge everything we think we know about human history.